evening. I hope everyone is well. It's another evening for us in England where we become more confident and confident that Lord Jesus Christ is on the throne and he rules and reigns. Can I get quick quick check if you can kind of hear me and see me? Hope sound is okay. Hope sound is okay and everything else is okay. So Phil, thank you very much for confirming the sound, and also thank you very much for all your contribution in the chat. It is amazing how God kind of puts people in our lives where we get to serve one another. Also, we get to see how people are serving us. So thank you very much for that. What we are going to do tonight is a bit different than what we did yesterday. Yesterday we wanted to discuss Piece of Christ Be With You from the films. Jay Smith is in chat because I'm hoping to have Jay in a bit to get his comments on what we are going to discuss. So yesterday we talked about love jihad, and I don't want to be personal or mean, but I think that topic kind of caused some tension in some of the houses. But God is God is good. Um, so what I'm gonna do is tonight we are gonna look at it's gonna be very short. We are gonna look at the corruption of the Quran and how that was not very big deal in early of Islam, but yet today it is a big deal in Muslim circle. What I mean with that is I'm sure most of you are aware with the claim is made by Muslims that Quran is dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word is exactly the same all over the world, as well as we get to hear the claims that today's Quran, not even a dot even changed from the Quran which Muhammad received. So that those are not very surprising comments for us, because we get to hear that from almost 99.9% of the Muslim world. Okay, you go to Saudi Arabia where people speak Arabic, they would make the same comment. You go to Jordan, people speak Arabic, they make the same comment. You go to Africa, it is the same. You travel to England and it is almost the same comment. So Quran, what Muhammad received, is exactly the same Quran and nothing has been changed. So far, when we look at the Islamic tradition, one of the things we noticed is Islamic tradition simply disagrees with Muslims and Muslim missionaries. Okay, and I think it was last year. I'll go with last year. I can't remember exactly the date when Dr. Daniel Brubaker put this book together in the intention of simply dealing with the early Quranic manuscripts. He looked at some of the early Quranic manuscripts, and then this is very short book. If you haven't read it, just check it out. Simply dealing with intentional corrections in earliest manuscripts, some of the earliest manuscripts. This is just 20 example in this, but if you kind of get the pictures of the manuscripts, you can have lots of examples. So just one simple book, which is just over 100 pages, tells us there were people who intentionally changed their early Quranic manuscripts in the intention to make them all put together, all them one Quran. So when we look at the Islamic tradition, we see the Quran Muslims read today is actually has nothing to do with Muhammad, nothing to do with Quran of Uthman or Quran of Abu Bakr, but it takes Muslims back to Quran of Hafs, and that Quran has been canonized, officialized in 1924, and then went up again in 1930s and 1980s. So that is the Quran Muslims are reading. That is the Quran telling Muslims that nothing has been changed. And we heard that quite a lot by Muslim missionaries at Speaker's Corner who are intentional to do dawah. They would look into the camera and then they would say, the Quran we are reading is dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word, is exactly the same what Muhammad put together. Even you get to have the same introduction in early, um, for example, Yusuf Ali makes the same claim in the introduction of the Quran. Fethullah Gülen makes the same claim. So not even a dot changed in the Quran. That was just one example, simply destroys the argument. But what I'm going to do tonight is I'm just going to look at only one of the example, and then I want to point out from this example that how Allah failed to communicate what he wanted to say. I want to point out from this example how early Muslims were disagreeing with one another regarding what's supposed to be in the Quran and which form is supposed to be in the Quran. And academic world, Muslim academic world is aware of it, but somehow the moment when the academia kind of shares the information, it stucks there. It never goes to the Muslim missionaries, as well as it never goes to the Muslim world. So we will be asking some questions on that. The reason we are asking this question because for centuries, Muslims without any shame critique the textual variations of the Christian scripture. Apparently, we never run away. Even the Bible I am using has, not this one actually, other one, has the footnotes, and it tells me about the textual variation. So we are not afraid of that. We simply talk about it because we know Bible is put together by humans. Versus Islamic teachings are Quran is the eternal word of Allah. Allah is the one who delivers word to angel. Angel pass on to Muhammad. Muhammad, without involving any of his emotions, any of his commands, simply passed that to people. People memorized it, and it has been perfectly memorized, and then it passed on to us today. Okay, that's the issue. That's the claim Muslims are making. As I said, Muslims are still today, not still today, but like before lockdown, Muslims were still without any shame making the claim that not even a dot changed. Okay, that is the claim. That's why it is important to us to look at it. So tonight, my plan is first I'm gonna ask basic questions and then show you one example, and then I will be looking at this example from couple of different perspective, and then hopefully we will get dot of Christ to come in and then talk about what does Arabic say, because I'm going to just summarize Arabic for you. And then after that, plan is Dr. J. Smith will join us and then comment on it as well. So that's the plan. Hope it all goes well. For that plan, that means also I am simply gonna share screen. Hopefully it will work. By the grace of God, it should work, but let's see how it's gonna take place. So I will also try to keep eye on the comment, but practically it is difficult for me to do so. Okay, because I'm looking on a couple of different apps and I don't have those basic skills. I'm not talking about 7 different recitations of the Quran, which no one even knows what is that recitation means. I am simply talking about the textual variations in the Quran, which Muslims are claiming never changed, even a dot not changed. I'm saying that was not the case in early Muslims. So let's get on with it. Please do let me know if you are able to see my screen and if my screen is making sense to you, because oh, I don't know why I have this thing here. Okay. Can I just get quick? I know you get to see my screen approximately 20 seconds after I speak. Can I just get a quick confirmation that my screen is being shown? So you should be able to see Surah 2, verse 137. Okay. And as you can see, this is simply copy and paste, not copy and paste, actually, screenshot of the Quranic verse from, I think this is Qur'anx.com. I did not translate anything. I did not write anything. Even though there is lockdown, still I don't have time to do those kind of things. So what we are looking at in this one is, we are looking at Surah 2, verse 137. I read it to you in English, and then hopefully when we get the daughter of Christ, she will read it in Arabic. So, if they believe in the same as you believe in, then they have been rightly guided. But if they turn away, they are only in decision, and Allah will be sufficient for you against them. And He is the hearing and hearer and knowing. This is Surah 2, verse 137. Okay? That's kind of what it says. Let's just move to the second slide. So I will hopefully able to make my case on what I'm gonna talk about. So this is one of the earliest Quranic manuscripts, and this is Quranic manuscripts identified as BnF 331. Okay, it's over 20 folios, but I am focusing on folio 2. Okay, in this folio 2, okay, this is very, very small, but I want first you to kind of look at from the big vision. Let me try to make this little bit bigger, and hoping that you will able to see a little bit kind of bigger. I'm not sure if you are able to see my mouse, but so this is the part I am looking. Okay, this is the part which Surah 2 verse 137 is. And if you look little bit carefully, not careful actually, let me try to make it bigger. Okay, that's where the technology is gonna fail me now. So if you look at the picture, what you are seeing is it is all written in the same ink, but there is this small word. There is this small word, very tiny little, with a very small ink. It is inserted into the manuscripts. It was not there at the beginning, okay? It was not there when the person was writing the manuscript. It was edited later by someone else. Okay, so let me show this in a bigger version. This is too big now. Okay, here's the another version of the picture manuscripts for you to see it. Okay, sorry. Okay, that's not helpful at all right now. Dear, whoever you were, can you call me later? Thank you. Are you able to see my screen now? I hope you can. So here's the manuscript again. Here's the manuscript again with a bigger version. Okay, and you can, in here you can see it much clearer. Okay, this is the word which we are looking. If you look at the writing, you will see other letters are written different than this word. Clearly, it is not written by same hand at the same time. It was edited later. This is Surah 2, verse 137. Here is the picture from Dr. Dan Brubaker, where in his book he looks at this. I think this is example 10 in his book. Okay, and then I'm sure you remember we did look at these examples with Dr. J. Smith. Today I'm just going to summarize because those are not my points. So Dan Brubaker, as he put together or as he looked at those manuscripts, he picked up this issue as well. He's telling me Surah 2 verse 137 has intentional insertion. Okay, and then yeah, you can kind of see those. This is like nice picture done by Jay. So here's my problem. Here's my problem. When I look at the tafsir of Tabari regarding Surah 2 verse 137, no worries, Arabic is on the screen for you. Translation is on the screen for you, but I will get an Arabic speaker to just read the Arabic for you, okay? This is Tabari. Tabari's tafsir for the Surah 2 verse 137 tells us. A qiraat was narrated from Ibn Abbas, which differ from what the Musafs of the Muslims came with, and the readers of the Quran agreed on leaving it. The word which was edited in that, okay, bi-mithli, that the word which was edited means same as. It says actually Muslims made the decision to keep that word out. When they were writing it down, they made a decision. It is Muslims made a decision, okay? It's not Muhammad. Muslims made a decision to leave that word out. Reason for that is, this is the Hadith 2109, and that is narrated by Muhammad ibn al-Mutni, that he said, narrated to us by Muhammad ibn Jafar. He said, narrated Shuba from Ibn Hamza. He said, Ibn Abbas said. This is not Ibn Abbas you pick up from the street, okay? This is Ibn Abbas, cousin of Muhammad. Cousin of Muhammad says, don't say, so if they believed in the same as what you have believed in, they will be guided. Ibn Abbas says, don't say that. That's the Quranic verse. As none is same as Allah, but it is, if they believed what you have believed in, they will be guided. Or he said, so if they believed what you have believed in. Ibn Abbas is saying, the current version of the Quran, which I showed you from the Quran.x, he says, don't say like that, because what will happen? Check out this part. As none is the same as Allah. He is making a theological comment. He's saying, if we use that word, which was edited later, that will imply in the verse that you will be equivalent to Allah. You will be Like there is nothing like Allah. Therefore, that word should not be there. Okay? That's what Ibn Abbas is saying. And then what Muslims did, they decided to keep it. Just let me point out once again from the picture again. Ibn Abbas is saying, okay, this circulated word, this small, tiny word, Ibn Abbas is saying, don't put this word there, because if you put it there, there is a theological implications. Ibn Abbas is not saying, this is what I heard from Muhammad. When Muhammad recited, word was not there. Ibn Abbas is not saying, this is not what I heard from the other narrators, or this is what angel brought it. Ibn Abbas is saying, this has a theological implications. We can't put it there. Okay? So what I've done, I shoved it to you Tabari's tafsir on this. Tabari tells us readers of the Quran agreed to leave it. And then here's another book. This book is written by Ibn al-Fath Ibn Jinni, okay? A man who lived approximately like 11th century, 1015 or something. That means approximate over 320 years after Hijrah. Approximate 320 years after Hijrah. That's almost the same time after Ibn Abbas, okay? And same time after Muhammad. So in his book, he looks at the problems and he tells us something very, very interesting. So get the volume 1, page 113 and 114. But as you do that, please beware. When you go to online, you will see some online version of this book. Some of them do not contain page 113 to 117. Please just beware of that. What you are looking is page 113 and page 114. Here is in the summary what is happening, okay? Arabic is on the side and English is on the side as well for you to see it. In his book, page 113, he tells us, from Ibn Abbas, he said, do not read if they believe the same as bi-mithli, what you believe, as Allah does not have anyone the same as him, but read in what bima you believe. Read what you believe instead of read what if they believe in this, they believe the same as what you believe. So he's simply changing the Quranic verse, or he's simply saying, okay, if you use the bi-mithli, there's a theological applications of that. Therefore, we can't use that one. And then on the third line, he says, it was also narrated from him that he used to read in which, that's the bilati, you believe, in that which you believe. So he is clearly doesn't want this word bi-mithli to be in the Quran, because he says, as Allah does not have the same as him, there is no one like has the same thing with Allah. There is a theological implications of this word. Don't use that word. He's not reasoning from, oh, this is what Allah gave, this is what Muhammad passed it, or this is what the angel passed it. Remember, Quran is the eternal word of Allah. He's not making a comment on such a things. He's saying there are the problems, there are theological implications, and therefore we should be using this. And he's not even using Muhammad as a reference here. This is the first cousin of whom? Muhammad. Let me read this page 114 in the same book. red part I am reading to you, so you can get the book online. Just make sure you get the right pages. And may Allah have mercy on Ibn Abbas. As he says, he's saying, even if it was an objection, it was taken from him as well as returned to him. And he was not blamed by the majority, and to Allah is the power and mighty. So they are simply disagreeing with what Ibn Abbas is saying. And then as the time is going on, so they leave the word out. As the time went on, they just like, oh, who cares what Ibn Abbas says? Even though he's the cousin of Muhammad, even though Quran is eternal, even though Allah is the best communicator ever, even though in the 21st century, Muslims are going to tell us not even a dot change in the Quran, we can still insert this word here with knowing it has the theological implications of it. So the question is, what did Allah reveal in the first place? Which version of this surah is in the Allah's eternal tablets? How can man has a power to make a comment on the word of Allah from 11th century to figure out, actually, let me see what Allah meant at the first place and let me contribute on it. Problem after problem. The main issue, one of the issue I have is Muslim academics are aware of it. In their small academic circle, they are talking about it. It is only Muslim missionaries, Dawah experts, Muslim polemists, and rest of Muslim world are not aware of it. And Dawah team, Muslim missionaries, so-called Islamic experts, without any shame, still tell humanity there is not even a dot changed in eternal word of Allah. I think it is like pretty sad. But in case some of you thought I am all misrepresenting what's happening here, I'm gonna call our Arabic speaker and then get help from her and then ask her to simply read the Arabic for us. And then as she reads the Arabic, ask her to simply summarize for us what's happening in Arabic. Why do we today have the different version of the Quran which Muslims had differently? And I will be keeping eye on the chat, I guess after this call. Okay, if you wanted to ask questions, comment, rebuttal, that will be towards end.
Good evening, sister.
Yes, peace of Christ be with you, sister. How are you?
Hi, peace of Christ, sister.
Can you speak a little bit louder for me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, let me get sound check from chat. Can I get quick sound check for Daughter of Christ who is on the phone? Sister, are you giving permission to be recorded here?
Yes, I am.
Good. Sister.
Yes.
Every time when you come to my live stream, I am heartbroken.
I know, sister. I feel bad for you every time it's a problem you have to deal with from Islam.
Yeah, so this time I am heartbroken because 21st century Muslim experts, Islamic Dawah team, and lay Muslims, beside a couple of people in academic circle of Islam, simply disagrees with Islam and simply disagrees with the Quranic tradition. Okay? So what I have, I am assuming you were watching me.
I was watching, and sister, you covered all the good points. Yes, it's
Okay.
shocking.
I don't want you to be shocked because we need you to just simply read the Arabic and make sure we understand what Arabic is telling us.
Okay.
Okay, put your unshocked face.
Okay, I'll take my shocked face off.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I have shared with people, I have shared with people the problem, like there are lots of those issues, but this is just beginning of this one. So I shared with people on the screen Arabic version of Surah 2 verse 137.
Yeah.
And this is from BnF Arabe 331 manuscript. Okay, so that I'll tell people which manuscripts it is so that people don't kind of abuse. This is like dated approximate first century Hijra. That will probably mean late 7th century and 8th century of our calendar. So this is the big up, like full folio, not full folio actually, screenshot, because I don't have the top of it. The verse is inserted.
Yeah.
That means verse was not there at the beginning. As the time went along, the word was edited in the intention to make all the Quran one. Okay.
Yeah, and I can see the dots as well on the inserted word, and there are no dots on the rest of the text.
I know. Remember when Muslims say it's not even a dot changed? You look at the earliest manuscripts and then you kind of, oh, not even a dot changed. They didn't even had the dots in that time.
Yeah.
But
So it's a bad forgery job because they didn't make it look like the rest of the words.
yeah, so what I have on my screen, which you will be seeing in 20 seconds, I have the tafsir of Tabari, okay, for the Surah 2 verse 137, where Tabari is expressing some of the conversation took place regarding the word bi-mithli. But actually, let me first show you the verse, and then you tell me what the word mean in the verse, so that we moved so fast. I am in the Arabic, I am in the verse of Surah 2 verse 137. Would you be able to read it for us in Arabic, and then identify this word bi-mithli and what does it mean?
Okay, so I'll read the Arabic.
Yes, please.
It says, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. So the word, so this means you've got all the translations. It says, so if they believe in the same as you believe, and other translation it says in the like of which you believe, which is also correct. And then they will be guided. That's the first part of the verse.
So
And
can you pronounce the word which were inserted later once again for everyone to get the sound correct?
بمثلي.
Bimithli. Okay.
بمثلي. Yeah, and it's the third word from the right.
Yeah, I highlighted it. After the alif. Alif is like letter looks like number 1.
Yes.
And can you tell us the meaning once again?
Yes, it's saying, and if they believe in the same as what you believe, or in the like of what you believe, they will be guided.
Okay, what is that word just as a bimithli? What is the meaning of that word just by itself?
Yes, the same as or the like of.
Okay, so that is today's Quran. Okay, so now we go back to a couple of centuries after Muhammad, where we will get to read Tafsir of Tabari for Surah 2 verse 137.
Yeah.
So I've got the translation in English, but if that's okay with you, I want you to read the Arabic for me and then translate the Arabic so that we make sure like we are not practicing to be Allah or Muhammad by deceiving people.
No, and I invite any Arabs in listening or in the chat, whether you're Muslim or Christian, to follow along with us. Or anything else. So it says, وَقَدْ رُوِيَ عَنْ Ibn Abbas في ذلك قراءة, which means a qira'ah or a reading was narrated from Ibn Abbas. جاءت مصاحف المسلمين بخلافها, which differed from what the Qurans of the Muslims came with, the mushafs of the Muslims. وأجمعت قراءة القرآن على تركها, and the readers of the Quran agreed on leaving it. So it's saying that Ibn Abbas read it a certain way, but then the readers of the rest of the Muslims agreed on leaving what he said.
Okay,
And
let me just understand that, sister.
yeah,
So Muslims decided to leave it out. Those
yes.
Muslims are not the Muslims who was alive and learning from Muhammad in the time of Muhammad.
No,
No.
they don't. They just say they're the readers of the Quran. They don't even name them.
Okay.
But they name Ibn Abbas, who's obviously very famous. He's a cousin of Muhammad, but he did something that they left out.
Okay.
Yeah. And then where you see the number 2109 and the red writing is the words of Ibn Abbas. It says, حدثنا به محمد ibn al-Muthni قال. So Muhammad ibn al-Muthni is the man who narrated from Ibn Abbas. He said, Muhammad ibn Ja'far said, Ibn Abbas said, لا تقولوا فإن آمنوا بمثل ما آمنتم به فقد اهتدوا. Ibn Abbas is saying, do not say the verse as in, so if they believed in the same as what you believed, you will be guided, or and the like of what you believe, you will be guided. فإن الله ليس له مثل, as no one is the same, or as no one is like Allah. But say it as, so if they believe what you have believed in. He said, say it فإن آمنوا بالذي آمنتم به فقد اهتدوا. So he took mithli out, yeah. Or say فإن آمنوا بما آمنتم به, or say if they believe what you believed in. So
just for me to understand it, Ibn
yeah,
Abbas is not saying this is the way I heard it from Muhammad or anything. Ibn Abbas is saying, no, if this is the way we are kind of putting together, that means there is a theological implications, and that theological implication is dangerous because it makes that you to look like Allah.
exactly. So he's actually making a very good point. He's saying, don't say if they believe like what we believe, because we believe Allah and there's nothing like him,
Okay.
which is obvious, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not even saying like Allah failed to kind of give me the right words. It's just we want to back Allah up.
Yeah, I don't understand why they are arguing amongst themselves what should be in the Quran. Shouldn't they know from the very reliable, quote unquote, Arabic tradition, oral tradition, what the word was from Muhammad and Jibril? Why are they arguing about it, sister?
It's called World of Islam, sister. It's called World of Islam. So suddenly they all forgot, like, oh, what Allah at the first place passed on the angel, and angel passed on Muhammad. Okay.
Yeah. And they're saying, oh, let's not put this word in because theologically it will be wrong. Well, it shouldn't be up to them. It's the word of Allah that wasn't touched, right?
It shouldn't be. But as I said, like the point I'm trying to make is Muslims didn't have any problem in early times that actually what Allah meant or what Allah kind of failed to meant. They were just simply trying to back it up. But anyway, so what I have, oh sorry, I'm just gonna make this a little bit smaller. What I have is on my screen. This is the book. I ask you to kind of look out for it. And then my understanding was actually some of the internet version of this book doesn't have page 113 to 117. That's just different story. But anyway, so I have on my screen page 113 of Ibn al-Fat Uthman Ibn Jinni's book.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you kind of read the Arabic for us in whole as a whole, and then translate it for us so that we make sure everyone follows what is Ibn Abbas issues versus what is the issue for the Allah, Muhammad, and 21st century Muslims.
Yeah, so it's saying here, وَمِنْ ذَلِكَ مَا حَكَاهُ ابْنُ مُجَاهِدْ عَنْ Ibn Abbas, and included in that was what Ibn Mujahid told from Ibn Abbas. He said, أنه قال لا تقرأ فإن آمنوا بمثل ما آمنتم به. He said, do not read if they believe the same, بمثل, what you believe. فإن الله ليس له مثل, as Allah does not have anyone the same as him. ولكن اقرأ بما آمنتم به, but read in what you believe in. The word, so he said change بمثلي to بما. And it was said وروي عنه أيضا أنه كان يقرأ بالذي آمنتم به. And it was also narrated from him that he used to read in that which you believe. Another word, a third word, بالذي.
So one verse has three options,
Yeah.
and then the issue is like, which one are you gonna follow?
Yeah,
And then
so
Ibn
he's
Abbas
saying,
says, don't use this one, the ones which is in current Quran, don't use that one, because that one has a theological problem.
yeah, and then in the ones that Ibn Abbas would read, he changed between two. He used bima, what, or billadhi, that which is. So it's even he didn't know which one. He was heard to recite one and then another.
Okay, so far it's going very well for Muslims. Okay, and of course for the eternal word of Allah. Let me move to the page 114, sister.
Yeah.
Are you able to see it yet? It's
Yeah,
actually, yeah. Okay.
yeah, I can see it. So here, the conclusion of the person writing this book about why Al-Abbas's Quran is different from the other Quran, he says, and I'll read it in Arabic. It says, وَرَحَمَ اللَّهُ ibn Abbas, and may Allah have mercy on Ibn Abbas. فإن هذا القول وإن كان اعتراضا عليه, saying, and his sayings, even if they were objections, even if it was an objection, فعنه أيضا أخذ وإليه رد, which means it was taken for him and rejected from him. So he's saying, oh, we can take it or leave it, basically. He's saying وغير ملوم من نصر الجماعة. He said, and he was not blamed by the majority of Muslims, and to Allah is the power and might.
So let me just kind of try to understand.
Yeah.
Allah reveals his word
Yeah.
perfectly to Muhammad. Muhammad passes around perfectly. People memorize it perfectly. People write it down perfectly. But within a couple of centuries, while everything is so perfect, we just read that people are discussing which word should be the version of that verse. Correct?
Yeah. And Ibn Abbas is so close to Muhammad. Why didn't he just ask Muhammad?
Yeah, why did Muhammad kind of told him at the beginning, this is the right version?
Yeah. I mean, if you recite the Quran or if you memorize the Quran, people are very specific about every word, every letter. And when I was memorizing the Quran as a Muslim, if I get even a fatha wrong or a sound wrong, I was told to go back and start again. And now I find there are whole words that are different. People are discussing which one they should put in, take out. I feel quite bad about this. This is been a sham. It's been a trick for all Muslims that the Quran has never been changed.
So you are disappointed that you've been lied to.
Of course.
I
Big
don't want to be mean to you, sister, but you know, the slides I show it to you, that is over like 300 pages in that slide. And just looking at, I haven't even kind of put all of them together. Some of them needs to be divided like 12. There are like a couple of thousands there. And this is just like what we have accessed so far. And as you know, lots of things, it's only stuck in academic world and it is not very much shared out there. So don't be surprised or heartbroken or need to visit hospital, because you will be seeing more. I'll encourage you from now, just start eating garlic so that you don't, when you see those thousands, that you don't get heart attack.
And I'm very happy even the book that you mentioned, sister, I didn't know that book, and I'm very happy that you sent it to me, because now this book, any Muslims, any Arabs listening, it's got thousands and thousands of these kind of problems in that book with the different verses, and how Muslims decided which one was better and which one was worse.
Yeah,
and I'm excited to see what's in it.
Yeah, and on the other side, we've got 37 different Arabic Qurans. And on the other side, I've got list of variations I'm still trying to put together between different within 37 Qurans. There are over 97,000 textual variations, yet I haven't even finished looking at it. One is more than enough for me. Plus I am trying to put together differences within first 7 Qurans. That is like going on. I think it's like already my Excel form is like getting expanded. So as God gives us grace and life, probably we will bring them up all. But I think this is just gently version of saying stop lying. Like now it's all over the books, all over the internet, all over the websites that actually your Quran has not been preserved well at all, especially not like dot by dot, sound by sound, word by word, even chapter by chapter.
And there is a Muslim in the chat who's crying about why we're so obsessed with Islam. I think when there is no answer at all and Muslims' feelings are hurt, they just say, "Why are you obsessed with looking into our religion? Stop it."
I am obsessed with Islam because teachings of Islam is taking you to hell. Teachings of Islam is putting you in a place that where you will never enjoy fellowship with God. Teachings of Islam damaging the humanity. That's the simple answer. Plus, another bigger answer is, my God loves you so much that he was willing to give his life. People like me and people like you. I just want you to turn your heart and sweeten your hearts towards him. That's all I want. And that's the desire of my God's heart. And sister, why are you so obsessed with Islam? What is wrong with you?
Because there are people in my family that are still Muslim and I've been lied to and are in this big scam, and I want them to wake up to the scam like I have, and people I care about, and even people I don't know who are Muslim. I'm obsessed with getting them to stop following a lie, to stop being a fool. I was a fool thinking Quran was never changed. Do you really want to stay in being fooled? You really want to be scammed? Go ahead. But some people want their eyes opened. Some people care about the truth. And we're speaking to those people who are Muslim. It's not their fault they were born into a Muslim family and fed lies from the day they were born that Quran is never changed and it's really from God. And it has been changed by the hands of men, by Ibn Abbas and others who were sitting there debating what words should go into the Quran when it should be from God. If you don't care to know about that, then I'm speaking to the people who care to know about that and who would leave this mess, this scam, and come to the real God, who really wants them and wants to love them and wants to save them from hell. That's why I'm doing this.
Thank you very much, sister. And thank you very much for help on Arabic. So that just helps Muslims to see. Actually, your Muslim scholars are just saying the same thing as we are saying. Quran has been corrupted, and this corrupted Quran is the eternal word of Allah. And on the screen, when you watch the video, you will see all the Arabic references. And if those of you who can't read the Arabic but just understand it, Dot of Christ read it for you. Just listen carefully and check it out. Of course, on the other side, we are aware how it works. First denial, then the denial, then the more denial, then the more denial. When the river of denial finished, you will bow down to Lord Jesus Christ. That's usually how it works. But that is so far that. Sister?
Yeah.
I'm gonna kick you out, but gently.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to hear from Jay from the films. And then I'll get Jay in and then hear what he has to say to me about perfect corruption of the eternal word of Allah.
Okay, sister.
Thank you very much.
I'll be listening. God bless you.
God bless you. Okay, that was the Dot of Christ. That kind of shows us Arabic speakers. Now you can't hide behind Arabic. Arabic speakers are able to read it and expose it. It is just very, very, we are doing very gently before it is too late. So what I'm going to do is, I hope Jay didn't give up on me and he's still there. Let me call Jay, and as I speak to Jay, I will be trying to keep eye on the comments. So please put your comments and put @ in front of DCCI Ministries. I can get to see them. Peace of Christ be with you, Jay.
Good. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, are you having long hair?
Oh yeah, this is what happens in lockdown. There aren't many haircutters open, and I kind of like it long. It gives me a sense of, actually, of ancientness, respectability. I look like a mad professor now.
People respect you. It has nothing to do with your hair, Jay. Still, we love you. God loves you.
I look like a mad professor is what everybody's telling me. So I'm gonna go ahead and until I can get out of lockdown and get to a haircutter. There's no way that I can really do much about this. You wrap yours up in a scarf. I just let my flocks grow.
Yeah, I'm just having bad hair day. Hopefully, very soon that will be.
You've had a bad hair day for the last 2 weeks.
Anyway, let's come. So Jay, you know this. There is a book called Quran, and it is.
I haven't asked permission whether or not you can record me.
Yes. Are you giving permission to be recorded?
Yeah, of course. Okay. But I want to make sure we got through that.
Okay. I am hearing echo.
Oh, you want me to put a?
Yeah, if that's okay. So I'm talking about this book called Quran, which is the perfect eternal word of Allah. Oh, Jay left.
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm talking about this perfect eternal word of Allah called Quran. Remember, we get to hear perfectly preserved, not even a dot change in it. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at Surah 2 verse 137, and I kind of try to put what Ibn Abbas said about Surah 2 verse 137, the word bi-mithli. He didn't want it to be there because it makes a theological implication to the word of Allah. But sadly, as the time went on, people insert the word there. So I'm looking at BnF 331 Qur'anic Manuscripts. I think it's folio 2. What do you think about this all perfect word of Allah, Jane?
Okay, there's a number of things that I'd like to add to this. Feel free to jump in at any time. I was listening for the last hour when you were going through with our sister and going through the Arabic, going through what exactly Ibn Abbas is. What in the world are you drinking from? That's even bigger than the bottle that you've been using.
Jay,
Goodness
just
sakes.
focus. Jay, just focus.
How can I? That just takes up the whole screen. Enormous. You could swim in that. Forget it.
I can't swim on that.
In
I don't know how to swim, Jay. So
absolutely, but you can do a baptism in something that large. Now let's go ahead. Get back to what we're talking about. First and foremost, you brought up with the sister a really good point, and this needs to be underlined, and that is this notion that the Quran, this book here, is completely preserved, as you've mentioned, not a dot different, not a letter different, not a word different, and that it cannot be changed. Now, this idea of in eternality is in the Quran itself. So that comes out of the Quran itself in chapter 85, verse 22. This idea that it is perfectly preserved, that's also in the Quran in chapter 10, verse 15, in chapter 15, verse 9, and in chapter 18, verse 27. We can read them. I've got them right here, and it's very clear. Let's go to chapter 10, verse 15.
So if Quran, which is the word of Allah, says it is perfectly preserved, and if we have the Quran today shows us it is not perfectly preserved, that tells us Allah is not capable to keep the promises he gives.
Okay. Before we get into that, let's go and underline where this comes from, because it's important for people to listen to, because we have two different discussions happening in the Muslim world today. One on orthodoxy, which sticks to the Quran, and one on academia, which does not stick to the Quran. So let's start. Oh man, there you go again.
Jay,
So I'm sorry, it's so enormous.
Okay,
I
I'll
like
try.
the ones you had behind you better. The ones with the women covered in veil. At least they were at a respectable size. But let's
That
go into this.
one of them is Aisha, other one is Sauda. But anyway,
And the third?
third one I couldn't figure out. So this is Sauda,
Right.
fat. Okay, because remember she was like fat and big. This is Aisha. She's on her youth. Okay.
How do you know? They look the same.
No, look, Jay. Look at her eyes.
I'm trying to
She's,
look. They should look exactly the same, like the one you just showed me.
She's look at them together. So one of them is
Or
fat, other one is like Tina and youth, young.
one
okay?
is all head, the other one is body.
Jay. And then this one is the one who works very hard, carrying. I couldn't figure out which wife that might be. I was thinking Hafsa, but I couldn't make my decision yet. So this
It is
one
Hafsa,
doesn't have a
because
name.
remember, Hafsa was the one that was not well treated.
Yeah.
It was Hafsa
No, that
who,
was
when she
Sauda.
left, it was Hafsa whose bed Muhammad took and went to the other woman, and then when she came back, she found that
Mary. Yeah, but from that, I'm not sure if I can come to the conclusion she was hardworking.
Let's get back to the subject.
Anyway.
Now, if you look at chapter 15, verse 10, it says, "Bring us a Quran other than this, or change it. Say, it is not for me to change it on my own accord." So that right there, you cannot, nobody can change it. That's very clear in chapter 10, verse 15. In chapter 15, verse 9, this is Allah himself. He's referring to himself. We who have sent down the dhikr, we will guard it. So he's saying that he will guard it. That's the Quran saying this, all right? In chapter 15, verse 9. And then we get to chapter 18, verse 27. "And recite what has been revealed to you of the book of your Lord. Understand and follow its teaching and act on its orders." Actually, that's not it. Of your Lord. "None can change his words, and none will ye find as a refuge other than him." So none can change his word. So two of these refer that nobody can change it. And this one in the middle, the one in chapter 15, verse 9, says that God himself will guard it. So that's coming out of the Quran itself. That's why orthodoxy has always held that stipulation. Nobody can change it except God himself. Now, there are changes. We talk about the law of abrogation in chapter 2, verse 109, and chapter 16, verse 101. That law of abrogation is within the Quran, and it has nothing to do with words being changed. It has to do with revelation being changed. We've talked about that, the enormous amount of contradictions in this book, around 222 of them that we have now been able to tabulate, and we could go and do a whole session just on those contradictions. Nonetheless, but this is not what chapter 10, chapter 15, and chapter 18 are talking about. This is that nobody outside of the Quran, nobody outside of Allah himself can change this word. So that's why this whole discussion of looking at the Quran, looking at the text, looking and seeing what Ibn Abbas is saying, has two different ramifications. Is Ibn Abbas, in the references that you just went through, is he talking about the textual change, or is he talking about a theological difference? He's talking about both. Did you pick that up? He's both saying this is a problem because it is not what God has instituted, and he's talking from an orthodoxy standpoint that God has always had this book. This book has always existed. That's from chapter 85, verse 22. If it has always existed, who are we as humans to assume that we would have the audacity to change what has always been? That's the first problem. And all of orthodoxy holds to that. That's why at the very beginning of the show, you were saying that 99.9, I would say 99.99% of the Muslim world agrees with that. The vast majority of Muslims. Because even if you say 99.9, let's see, that's 0.01% of 1.8 billion, that's still 18 million. 18 million Muslims believe you can change the word of God? Can you show me even 1 million Muslims?
I'm not gonna deal with the number, but like I just wanted to make a point. Like it's only handful of people in the academic circle would say yes, Quran has been transformed, changed, and edited.
Okay, handful. That's 5.
Okay, to a handful, Jay. I'm not gonna give
That's
you
10.
Okay, whatever I would say handful of Muslim scholars.
I would like you to show me 10 academic Muslims who are still Muslims who would make that claim?
Altı kulaç.
Altı kulaç is very careful not to make that claim.
Oh, well, in his writings, he shows it has been changed.
Okay, he is saying that these are nothing more than scribal changes, scribal errors.
Yes,
These are mistakes by humans later on.
yeah, but that's all over the same thing at the end, since we do have the eternal word of Allah where no one can change it.
So
And
you
he's
see
giving
why
me the
he is
examples
very
after
careful. Now,
examples.
this is the public versus private face of many academics, and this is unfortunate. This is unique to the Muslim world. If you're an academic in the Muslim world, you dare not say in public what you would say in private. Even Western academics have this problem. This is the only area, and I've said this many times. I know Muslims don't like me to say it. I know there are an awful lot of people in the world that don't like to hear this, that there's something unique about Islamic academia or workers or Islamicists like you and me. We are Islamicists. We are not Islamists. The difference is we are from outside of Islam studying Islam. Someone who is from inside is Islamist. Someone who's outside of it studying Islam is Islamicist. You get the difference. And when we say that there are differences, when we say that this is a real problem, when we look at bi-mithli and see that this is an insertion that comes later, as you noticed already, you talked it out. The references that you talked about, the fact that it's a different nib, the fact that there are diacritical marks, there are dots put in it, the fact that there's vowelization, there's a kasra, bi-mithli, there's a kasra put up there. And so because of this, this is a much later edition. With this coming in, because of the fact that it's a much later edition, it is problematic for the orthodoxy. It is problematic for anybody that holds this as their standard. And that is 99.9 or even more so. I would say it is even less than two handfuls that would ever say that this has been changed, or the bi-mithli is a addition or an insertion that must be there, must stay there. And I'm sorry, they wouldn't say that. Sorry, I just did the opposite, because it is there now. It is in chapter 2, verse 137. Chapter 2, verse 137, bi-mithli is there. Here's a problem. What Dan Brubaker is bringing up, he's not just talking about this insertion of bi-mithli. If you could put the page back on again, go and look at the bi-mithli there. And this is something that I want your Arabic sister to talk about. Take a look at that if you can put it up again, because there's something else wrong with that bi-mithli. Look at it carefully. It has a grammatical error built into it.
Just a moment, it's coming, Jay.
Okay, Islam Critique, I see you've got that up on the screen. Let me just respond to that. Thanks for coming on board, Islam Critique. I won't say who your name is, but your scholars, 7 Qira'at is a 10th century development, Ibn Mujahid. Others argued for 10 or 14. Yes, and what you're bringing up, Islam Critique, is a problem. Remember, those scholars, and Qira'at is a different argument. Let's don't confuse Qira'at and Ahruf with what we're talking about now. We're talking about Razm verse, and we're not talking about Qira'at. We're not talking about Ahruf. We are talking about actual words, the letters.
I put it there because he's just responding to someone. I just wanted other people to see his response to a Muslim.
Okay, but for those who are probably also confused, there is a huge body of literature concerning Qira'at and Ahruf readings. Readings, by definition, are talking about dottings and vowelization. Okay? Now let's get back to this. We're not talking about dottings and vowelization now. We're talking about actual word changes. And bi-mithli, if you look at that, if you have a chance to get that up there, once you get it up, take a look at it carefully, and you will see there's an additional B before ma.
Yeah, it's on the screen now.
Okay. As soon as it comes up, I'll look at it and I'll show it to you.
It is already has the green arrow with titled as 2.
Number 2. Look at number 2. And when you look at number 2, can you see there is a B ma? So you have number 1, bi-mithli, that's the one that's inserted, and then number 2, B ma. But I actually the arrow is pointing towards the ma. Look at the B just before it. Can you just circle the B just before it? It's after the lam. After bi-mithli with the kasra below it. Right immediately after it is a beam with a dot below it, that's the beam.
This is the one, yeah.
That means there's two B's there. Now, I want to ask our Arabic sister, is that correct? Can you have bi-mithli, bima in a sentence? Is she still on board, or are we still talking?
No. She's not on Skype, Jay.
Okay, all right. We cannot. This shows that there is not only an addition. They in introducing the bi-mithli into the text there, they forgot to erase the b that follows it. You cannot have two b's because it's just not grammatically correct. So that is another error that Dan Brubaker brought up. Now, here is what's interesting. Those who are confronting Dan Brubaker, and they are starting to come out. One is Haitham Sidki. Haitham Sidki is a scholar. Well, he's a self-proclaimed scholar, but a lot of people would say that he is a scholar. He's written a rebuttal to Dan Brubaker's book. It's a very well-written rebuttal. It's 16 pages long. I've read it. Dan Brubaker knows Haitham Sidki. He's had him in his home. They are friends of sorts. And he has written a scathing attack against Dan Brubaker. But when you take a look at it, it's fascinating because he is not at all arguing from the premise that this is a problem. He's assuming already that there are many errors. He even quotes, and if you have the paper there, I gave some quotes here from his paper. He quotes a number of people. He talks about Al-Farahas, who died in 822. The manual Al-Qur'an is brimming, he says, with reports of regional and non-regional razm variants. Do you see the difference? Not kirat, not ahruf. These are razm variants. Okay, that's a distinction I'm trying to make. He goes on and says, Abu Ubaid, who died in 838, traveled the Muslim world, collecting such differences firsthand. These find their way into his Fada'il al-Quran and later works. These are razm variants. Ibn Abi Dawud, 928. Are you looking at the dates that he is attributing to these? Now, of course, there are some problems. We don't have any of Abu Ubaid's or Al-Farah's original texts. We only have those that refer to them, that quote them. But Ibn Abi Dawud, he is one of the hadith compilers. In his Kitab al-Masahif is dedicated to collecting reports of so-called companion codices and other orthographical idiosyncrasies. In fact, he goes on to say the canonical hadith collections also make note of contentious razm variants. There's the word, razm, not diacritical, not vowelization. These are razm variants with several disagreements attributed to the companions himself. So he is very well aware. These are nothing big. Who cares is what he's saying. We know this. This is nothing that really bothers me. Now, how is he saying this, Hatun? What in the world is he saying? Does he represent Islam when he says this?
He's speaking on behalf of academic Islam, academic Muslims.
Define and explain what you mean by academic Islam.
The ones probably kind of thinks, yeah, Quran is a text that we need to investigate it and study it.
So what's his presuppositional base when he makes a claim like that? What's he starting from?
Quran is just a book like any other books. Written by humans.
So what does that mean about Surah 85, Ayah 22, Surah 10, Ayah 15, Surah 15, Ayah 9, Surah 18, Ayah 27? Does he even hold to these references?
His interpretation of those verses are different, but overall he's putting together, I think he's doing good job for Islam because people have not looked at those things. Even Muslim missionaries whom kind of work together with him or follow one another, still like they are aware of those variants, yet they still without any shame claim that, oh, it's all perfectly preserved dot by dot. I think he's doing very good job for Islam, and it is good Muslims are coming out and thinking, yeah, it's time for us to look into our scripts. It is time for us to study our manuscripts and then put material together.
Let me give you a quote that he pulls out from Dan's book. He brings out this quote. Interesting. This is a quote from Dan on page 19 of his book. The notion that there was strict uniformity and widespread agreement about every detail, that's the Quranic script, that's the razm, not the ahruf, not the kirat. Every word and letter, such as one would expect to find if there were widespread agreement, upon a standard from a very early date, such as the time of Uthman's caliphate. So he's saying that this notion that there is no fluidity, that this was already standardized at the time of Uthman, is what we're starting with. That's the premise we're starting with. Look at Sidki's response to that. Although this is not an uncommon notion among modern day lay Muslims, okay, when it comes to scholarly work, as early as we can peer into the Islamic past, we find widespread recognition of orthographic variations among Muslims. So you can see he's arguing from a completely different standpoint. He's talking right past Dan Brubaker. The two of them are not even on the same page. Why? Because Dan Brubaker, who is a scholar, he understands scholarship. He is the first to ever have published a work of this kind. He is not there trying to write a book for the scholars, other scholars. He's trying to write a book for you and me, for everybody in the world, for all the 99.9% of other Muslims who actually trust the Quran, who actually use the Quran, who actually go to this book to find out how they're to believe, what they're to believe, and who is it that actually gave us this book, provided this book. And for 99.9%, or even more so, I would say for the vast majority of Muslims, this book is eternal. This book has always been preserved. It has not been touched by human hands. It has no interference. As you said at the very beginning of your program, there is not one dot different that is what in this book as what's in heaven. It has not one letter, not one word, not one phrase, not one ayah, not one surah. Everything is exactly preserved. Why? Because the book says so, because Allah says so, because He says in chapter 10, verse 15, no one can change it. He says in chapter 15 that He will preserve it, that He will guard it. And He says in chapter 18 that no one has a right to change this book. Only Allah does. That's why Ibn Abbas was so angry. That's why he was saying, how can you dare say that you are equal with God when you're saying that you can add bi-mithli there? You cannot add, you cannot change it, you cannot import some other phrase to make it more understandable. You cannot do that with God's word because this is the eternal, preserved word of God. Now, interestingly, no one seemed to pay attention to Ibn Abbas because that phrase is in there. And as your sister, the Arabic sister said, it's just there. Read it in chapter 2, 137. Bi-mithli has been added in, not with the bi-ma, but bi-mithli ma. So that's why it's fascinating to me that people like Sidki, Haytham Sidki, is just dismissing this and wondering why Dan's getting all upset about it, why he's even publishing well, it's not that why he's publishing a book on it, but why he's making this claim. Well, the reason why is because Dan is speaking to people like you and me. Dan is speaking to everybody that's listening to us. Dan Brubaker's book. Now, remember, this is the first. There's a second one coming out right now. He's publishing his second book, and it's all on this manuscript right here. See this manuscript that's on the cover of the book? This is the new book. It's coming out next week. Wait till you see what he is going to show here. And this is why the Sidkis need to wake up, because you can only stay in academia for so much of your life. You can stay in these ivory towers. Yes, you can stay there for the rest. You can probably here in America where he lives. In fact, he only lives about an hour from me, where I live right now. He's very close. He's actually very close to Dan Brubaker. They're actually neighbors, the two of them. But you can only say these kind of things in academia, in university context, with other academics. I would imagine that the majority of people who are even listening to this program have never heard the name Haytham Sidki, because he does not represent the vast majority, almost all the other Muslims around the world. And it's fascinating to me that these Muslims who are claiming that there are razm variants, these are not, this is nothing to do with ahruf, there's nothing to do with kirat. Razm variants, these are orthographical variants as early as the original or the earliest manuscripts, and that we can understand why they were there. Now, Haytham Sidki is very clear. He does make the admission that we can't find that Q document, that archetypal document from which all these others come from. Notice he mentions that. These all come from this archetypal document, which is the Uthmanic recension that he claims from 652. Where is it? He doesn't know. But that must be there. Why? Because we have all these other ones that are standardized to it. And that's why he really jumps on Dan Brubaker and says, how dare you say that this is something from 1924? This was there from the very beginning. There was this archetype, this Q document that was there from 652. And we know that because there are the fact that we know variations, you can't have variations unless you have an archetypal from which to model it from. Well, then where is that model? I'd like for him to produce it. We've been asking for this. I've been asking this for 40 years. Where is that Uthmanic recension that everybody seems to be suggests is that model, is that Q document, is that document from which all the other manuscripts are derived or are copied to? And yes, that they have manuscript variants here, they've missed out a word here, they've missed out a phrase there, as even Sidki says, oh yeah, of course, they've erased it and we don't know what's under there, but it doesn't matter because we've got the archetype. Where? What archetype? What does it exist? Are you following me, Hatun? Do you see why this whole argument is based on nothing than hypotheses, based on nothing more than a desire, a need, a demand? It's almost like the same argument that many liberal historians have said about the Bible. There is a Q document that is the archetype from which all the other gospels were taken. Where is this Q document? Why is it suddenly the Q document becomes the standard? And what is that standard? And when did that standard finally, as far as with the Quran, when did that Q document suddenly resurface? And where is it today? Well, we'd love to see it. Because what Dan is bringing up is these are not just, look at it, he only gave 20 examples in this book, just 20. He's found 4,000. And he just gave a smattering of examples to help you understand what an example per category. He tried to show as many different categories. Now, what's Siddiqui going to do when Dan Brubaker starts publishing the 4,000 and more? He's still adding to that. There's still more he's finding. Much more troubling. And it's fascinating to me that the Siddiquis, the Haytham Siddiquis of the world, are going to be talking to people of their own kind within their own ivory-towered, secluded academic institutions. But they're not talking to you. They're not talking to me. They're not asking the questions we're asking. And they're not helping their Muslim brothers who absolutely trust this book. They absolutely trust what this book is saying. They have to. They have no other place to go to. And they absolutely assume that this book cannot be changed. And they're not talking about diacritical marks changing. Of course those happen. That's why we have so many, you found 93,000 of them. Those are from the 10th and 11th century. Sorry, the 9th and the 10th century. We're talking about from the 7th century. The fact that there are no manuscript variants that we can find, that there are manuscript variants that we can find from the 7th and 8th century, the earliest manuscript, and they're not just one or two, they're not just 20 that are in that book. There are as many as 4,000 that we're up to now. That should be hugely troubling to every Muslim, because look at what that means. That means this book is just like any other book. It was written by men. It can no longer make the claim to be eternal. It can no longer make the claim that God has preserved it. Because if God had preserved it, then what in the world was he doing allowing these 4,000 variants to creep in at the very earliest stage? If God had preserved it, then why do we have 93,000 differences of Kirat and Ahruf delineations? And you have shown how if you just look between the Hafs and Sayyid Lamwarsh, just look at the different theological differences depending on where you put those dottings and where you put those vowelizations. Where was God in all this? And who in the world was the one that suddenly decided that he was going to talk for God and claim that the Hafs derivation of those Ahruf and Kirat was the standard text? Where did this Al-Haddad, Muhammad Al-Haddad from Cairo in 1924, there at Al-Azhar University, where did he get this idea that this is the text, this is the variants, this is this Hafs guy who died in 796, in late 8th century? Where did he get this notion that that was the correct text? Throughout all the others, you have 36 of them now. Throughout the other 35, took them out into the Nile and dumped them into the river, thinking that would solve the problem. Didn't solve the problem. Because no one's talking about the earliest manuscripts. You've got to come back to what Daniel Brubaker is saying. You've got to come back to what he is showing. The fact that bi-mithli has been added at a later date, the fact that when it was even added, whoever added did not know the Arabic, still got it grammatically incorrect by putting another b, by leaving the bima that was already there. The fact that this shows that this is, even if this is a in error or a scribal error, the fact that it does not support what Ibn As is talking about, the fact that Ibn As got so angered by this because this now shows that somebody can change the word of God and also basically gives himself the same authority as God himself. Well, that's called shirk. And that's what he's saying. This is shirk. And the person is doing it is a mushrik. And if you agree with it, then you're mushrikun. You are actually people who now elevate yourself alongside God, elevating yourself. That's what he was saying. So this is not only a textual problem for Ibn Abbas, this is a theological problem for Ibn Abbas. Now, I've talked enough. Go ahead, come back on me and see what you have to say.
I'm just gonna make a comment on a couple of comments from chat. Some Muslims believe Quran has been perfectly preserved since Uthman since Muhammad in the hearts of Muslims. Actually, you should know better than me that is not the case, because if there was a perfect preservation of the recitation of the Quran, then you wouldn't write it down first place. You wouldn't be worried, oh, where are those verses? In the Quran, we would find the verse of adult breast suckling, or rest of Surah 33, or rest of Surah 9. So that was, memorization was not the good thing. It didn't work. Plus, the reason at the first place Quran is written down, because there was a problem in the recitation, in the memorization of the Quran. People of Azerbaijan were fighting with one another. Therefore, they come to Uthman and then they say, okay, before there is a division in the community, let's fix this. That's the first thing. Second thing is, Jay, this is on the screen as well. Manuscripts variants are just scribal errors, and it is always corrected by Muslim thanks to the preservation of the Quran in the hearts of Muslims, as Allah promised in Surah 19 verse 5. Actually, in Surah
15, verse 9.
Verse 9, thank you. Actually, in Surah 15 verse 90 to 95, Allah also preserved the corruption of the promise for the corruption of the Quran. You can check it out. Allah is gonna shredder the Quran. If they are just scribal errors, and if it is in your heart, can you tell me how confident your heart is that regarding the Surah 2 verse 137, why are you not following Ibn Abbas' recitation of Surah 2 verse 137? Currently, Ibn Abbas is proposing three different recitation for only one verse, and one of them changed the theological implication of it. Which side of your heart is affecting you to follow this current Quran? Which side? Like there is a problem in the recitation, as there was a problem in the recitation from time of Muhammad.
Can I just go on from that? That's a good point, Hatun. This is fascinating that Abbas Agha is saying that Surah 15, Ayah 9 actually supports and guards it. If it's guarded, then he's not a very good guardian. I could say, simply put, you can see this dispute between Ibn Abbas and others. Why is it that Ibn Abbas has a reference that is different than that which has now found its way into the Quran? So which heart is the closer, Ibn Abbas or actually the present, the text that we have used today? Is bi-mithli, is that the word that is there in the preserved tablets that exist like eternally in heaven? Or is it simply bima? Which is it? Can you see, you cannot have this both times. And if you're saying it comes from the hearts of the Muslims, you're already showing that the hearts of the Muslims don't correspond. I hope you've been watching and listening to what Hatun has been bringing up with our Arabic-speaking sister. The fact that you have this dichotomy already within just this one verse between Ibn Abbas and everybody else, or certainly what the Al-Haddad has finally chosen, or whatever that Q document is, shows that there is not the heart of Muslims is not uniform. And that means that God is incapable, your God, not my God, but your God is incapable of preserving the text. So be careful what you're saying here, because you're actually contradicting yourself. This all the more also brings up to the whole notion that Muslims, as long as they hold to this notion that every dot and every letter and every word is preserved. Now, this is something that's, I'm assuming that Abbas Aga that you're saying as well. I think that they're simply speaking that obviously that if you take to this, you're going to have to prove it to us. You haven't been able to do so, certainly with just this, and we're just using one example. Bi-mithli is a simple example to use. But you could go to the other 4,000 that Dan Brubaker is going to begin to publish. He will continue to publish these. And you're going to have to say that there are so many different hearts. There are so many different viewpoints. There are so many different variations. 4,000 already that he's found from just the earliest 10 manuscripts. That suggests to me that this is an enormous amount of different schools in the 7th and 8th century who were arguing with each other and trying to come up with where they were going to go with this Quran. But then you can understand why. The Quran in and of itself just doesn't make sense. 20% of it doesn't even make sense to the scholars. So when you have such a hopeless book for which to work with, if you have such an inadequate book from which to work with, you're going to see there's going to be awful lot of disputes. So understandably, what you're seeing from all these different disputes, even this reference to Ibn Abbas. Now, of course, remember, Ibn Abbas, though he was the cousin of Allah, we get his references, we get these quotes of Ibn Abbas from the late 9th century. We're getting him from Sahih Muslim and also Al-Tabari and also from Sahih Bukhari. These are 870 and later, late 9th century. So we don't even know if they are accurate. Nonetheless, the fact that there is this dispute even continuing up until the 9th century suggests to me that you have a real problem, Muslims. Be careful of what you claim. You cannot support what you're claiming. Not if you're going to remain orthodox. You're going to have to move and start moving over to someone like Hayden Sidki. You're going to have to start taking his position because really there's no one. After a while, we're just going to give up listening to you guys and you gals. Because what you're claiming cannot be supported from the historical evidence, from the manuscript evidence. Now, you go on and say, Ibn Abbas was not inspired by God, and how are we to know that Ibn Abbas actually said it exactly? There's your difficulty.
It's not only Ibn Abbas was not inspired by Allah. Uthman was not inspired by Allah. Abu Bakr was not inspired by Allah. Muslims today are not inspired by Allah. Hafs was not inspired by Allah, yet you are reading their Quran. There is a problem. You can't just, it will be helpful to just come up with better arguments.
Well, yeah, and to take it one step further, Hatun, who then is inspired by Allah, and what is this archetypal text that you're talking about?
Like man who is inspired.
Where is it? Where is this one that is inspired by Allah? If we have so many thousands of variations, then show me the original one. We're only talking about 1400 years ago. That's not very long ago. Listen, if you want to look at the New Testament, we have got over 360 manuscripts, either complete or partial, from before the 6th century for the New Testament. And we can go right back to the 4th century, to 325 and 350 for the entire New Testament. So that's 300 years before the Quran. If we can preserve so many under persecution, because remember, when the New Testament was being written, it was done under persecution. There was a Diocletian edict that happened in 300 AD, which eradicated most of the manuscripts that existed, and yet we're still able to preserve 365 of them by the 6th century. That's 100 years before the Quran. Why can't you find that original manuscript that you're talking about, the one that is from Muhammad, just from the mid-7th century? If you could provide 114 surahs of one manuscript that's from the mid-7th century, I would believe what you're saying. But don't come off with this idea that we have it in our hearts. You cannot. I don't trust your hearts because you have too many hearts. You have, it looks like over 4,000 different hearts from what I've seen. And that just isn't trustworthy. So stop making these claims. Just please stop making this claim. After a while, we're just going to stop believing you.
Yeah, I'm just going to move on a little bit quicker. The comments regarding Uthman copied the Quran from Abu Bakr goes against Islam. It goes against Sahih Bukhari. No, like he got the Hafsa's Quran, but he put a committee together, and that committee simply followed Zayd bin Thabit. So that's not correct. There was not like copy and paste. If that was the case, he would simply keep the Hafsa's Quran, but he didn't do that. So that argument doesn't
unpack that a little bit. unpack that a little bit. Let's just say
No,
we have
I
Abu
just
Bakr
wanted to
Quran.
move on quicker. Sorry. But if you want, you can unpack that, Jay.
Real quickly, I'll say it real quickly. If Abbas Agha said that we have Abu Bakr's Quran, if that were the case, show me. Where is it? You can't find it. Why? And you will say, well, because it was destroyed along with all the other ones that were no longer that no longer paralleled the one by Uthman. Right there and then you can see, what did they destroy? They destroyed it because it did not obviously, if you believe the traditions are true, it did not parallel the final recension, the Uthmanic recension in 652 that was then compiled by Zayd ibn Thabit, the first one, the same guy that compiled it in 632, 20 years earlier. The fact that he had to redo it, the fact that he had to rewrite it, the fact that he had to have three others to help him, the fact that they had to use this dialect, which has nothing to do with razm. Dialect are vowelization. That was added much later. The fact that he had to write a completely different Quran and then had to destroy all those disagreed with it that shows that this first one, Abu Bakr, was full of errors. Was not even complete. Was not good enough. Otherwise, as Hatun said, they would have just have used Abu Bakr's original manuscript. That's not in existence. So even 20 years later, they had to rewrite it. That's just what the traditions tell us. I would like to ask you, where is that original one from Abu Bakr? Where is the original one from Uthman? That's all we're asking. Is that too much to ask for?
Muslims in Indonesia to Canada recite the same Quran. That's like very, very bad argument. At the time of Muhammad, within first centuries of Islam, Muslims were reciting different Qurans. You don't need to travel all the way to Indonesia or Canada, just travel to Morocco. You will get to listen different Arabic Qurans. Even there is a mosque in London, you go and then you get to hear different recitation of the Arabic Quran. So that's not helpful argument either. Do you want to follow the Muslims in Indonesia? Is your eternity belong to them, or go back to the time of Muhammad and there were apparently lots of different versions of it?
Abbas Agha, why do you think in 1924 the Department of Education there in Cairo, just the city of Cairo, were getting so many different responses to their standardized tests on the Quran from the students? These are high school students. They were getting such a variety of answers, all of which were correct because they were using up to, we now know, possibly 39 different Qurans, that they had to ask Muhammad ibn al-Haddad al-Husayni al-Haddad from Al-Zad to choose one of these and make it the official Quran. Why did they have to do that in 1924? So they could standardize their tests, so they could have standardized answers. And when he finally chose the Hafs Quran, which was supposedly compiled in 796, 8th century, they then chose that as their standard test just for Cairo. In 1936, that was such a successful experiment that they started to make it Egypt-wide. It was not till 1985 that King Fahd in Saudi Arabia made it standardized for the entire world. So that today, since 1985, all of you Muslims now have one text, the Hafs text, not the other 38, to look to, so that you have a standard text. So when you tell me that those in Canada and those in Indonesia are reading the same text, I will listen to you saying absolutely, as long as you follow that which King Fahd and the canonical text that they have now designated since 1985. But that's only 35 years ago. So the text in the last 35 years is the same. But as you're going to find, not everybody wants to go with King Fahd. They don't all want to go with the canonical text. The fact that you can even find different readings within London, and I'm sure wherever you come from, the fact that those still exist, the fact that Hatun could buy 36 of them and have them, you can see them behind her. They're right there on her shelves. These different derivations, these different qira'at, these different ahrufs, these different readings exist all over the Arab world today. So don't tell me that they're all reading the same text. As Hatun says, they are not reading the same text. Oh, the majority of them are, because they've now come under the rubric of King Fahd. They've now come under the canonical text, which only the Saudi Arabian government recognized in 1985. The Egyptians were way ahead of them. And the reason the Egyptians wanted it, not so that they could say this is from God, they wanted it so they could just get their tests parallel and uniform. That's the only reason. It was only the Department of Education that wanted it, not the mosques, not the There was no caliph at that time. Well, there was, but he was eradicated in 1924. So can you see why this is a nonsensical thing to say? Be careful what you're saying. And we're just, as Hatun said, we're just going to shut that down very quickly.
Sorry, Jay, I'm just keeping eye on the comments.
Okay. While you're keeping an eye, we do need to bring this down because I do have to get moving on. I have an awful lot yet to do. My family's waiting for me. But let's do this. What have we shown today? And let's try to summarize where we've been going with today. And I think what you have done, and thanks so much, Hatun, for bringing this up. This is so important that we do bring this up. When you have someone like Dan Brubaker, and remember, he's the first to do this. Why is it that it has to be a Westerner, an American, who got his doctorate in this material? This is his part of his doctoral thesis. Why does it take a non-Muslim to even publish these razm, these consonantal text differences, variates, these orthographical variants? Why does it take an American to do this? Why was this not done earlier by Muslims themselves? For one very good reason. No Muslim's going to do this unless you're Haytham Sidki. But Haytham Sidki doesn't even think this is a problem. He dare not do this because you know it's not very healthy if you were to do this. Look at the scathing remarks we get, Hatun and I get, and others like Dan Brubaker gets from many Muslims today. They're not very pleasant. It's no fun getting this kind of vitriol because we're actually asking the question that every historical book should be asked. Any revelation that makes claims like you Muslims have made, like this fellow has been making today, that these are eternally preserved, that there is not one difference. If you make that claim, you put the Quran in such a high pedestal, you put it up so high up there that it's easy to knock down, as Dan Brubaker is doing. When you come up and show that if you're going to make these claims, you have to support these claims. The fact that you cannot support them, and the fact that your liberal academic brethren already have given up on this, suggests that the rest of you are going to have to give up on this as well, which says to me that really the Quran is no different than any other text. It's no different than any other man-made text. It does not come from God. It does not come from Muhammad. It does not come from Uthman. It doesn't even come from Abdul Malik. So who then created the Quran that we have today? Where then did this Quran come from? I leave it over to you, Muslims. Provide me a manuscript, just one manuscript that parallels this book, that doesn't have these thousands of razm errors, these orthographical errors that is in the consonantal text, not the canonical, sorry, consonantal text. Show it to me. Before you make these claims, prove it, because you cannot prove it anymore. The Quran is we're bringing the Quran down to human terms. We're bringing the Quran down to earth. We're bringing the Quran down to where it belongs. It's nothing more than a book compiled from many different sources, slapped together rather hurriedly because they had to do so. Once they had the Prophet, they needed a Quran. So they've borrowed it from many, certainly apocryphal Jewish writing, from Christian sectarian writings. They borrowed it from Zoroastrian writings. You can see they borrowed it from many different cultures, many different texts, full of contradictions, full of historical anachronisms, full of scientific errors. That's why it is so full of errors, because whoever put it together didn't really look at it very carefully. And that's why it's all over the place. That's why it doesn't flow. That's why it doesn't have any sequence. That's why you have verse after verse story after story that does not begin, does not end. They don't go from one story to the other. There's no transitional phrases. It goes ulta pulta, as we say in India. It is all over the place because it was brought together all over the place. And when it was done so rather hurriedly, then you can see committee after committee had to then work with it and had to change it. But once it was there, once they got it together, they had realized they had to bring in this verse here, or they had this discussion here about this verse and this discussion about that verse, because it did not correspond. And that's why they had to start erasing it. That's why they had to start writing in little words like bi-mithli into and interject it into it. And you can see this is discussion that's happening in the 9th century, redacted back to a man named Ibn Abbas. I believe fairly well that by the 9th century these discussions were going on as to what would be that final text. And that's why in the 9th century they give name of Ibn Abbas on it, because if you give the name of Ibn Abbas and you put it back to the cousin of the Prophet, then you give a lot more authority for it. But whoever actually wrote about Ibn Abbas Abbas in Al-Bukhari in Sahih Muslim. When he did so, he was actually bringing up a theological problem. This was actually a debate that was happening in the late 9th century, possibly the early 10th century. It could even be the 11th century because we don't have anything of Al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim from the 9th century. But nonetheless, it was happening much later as all these different theological experts were getting in and saying, we've got a problem here. How can you have somebody putting bi-mithli there? How can you have somebody who's actually adding to the word of God? Because this then elevates him to the status of God himself. And this is shirk. You cannot do this. Well, then the people dismissed that. And after a while, they said, don't worry about it. Let's just keep it there anyways, because we like the fact that it's actually grammatically correct. But then you have this manuscript. Here you have a manuscript from France there in the Bibliothèque Nationale, the Arabe 331, Bibliothèque Nationale de France. And that's why you have this manuscript where this has been added in, because here they forgot to add it in at one time, or they never was there when it was first originally written. That's why it had to be added in, because now whoever were the powers that be, once they finally start standardizing the text, had to then add that in there. And once they add that in there, whoever put it in there didn't know their Arabic very well, because they left a B there that shouldn't have been there. There are too many B's. Two B's is one B too many. And so that's why now what we have here, you have a glaring contradiction, but not only a textual contradiction, a glaring theological contradiction. And that's why they're attributing it to Ibn Abbas, because they've got to get a game that's big enough to do so. And what we're left with is another mistake after another mistake, another insertion after another insertion. And then you Muslims in the 21st century say, but there is no contradiction, but there is nothing, because you can see why. For you Muslims in the 20th and the 21st century, you have nothing else but this book. This is the only thing you have. This is the only authority you have. This is your primary revelation, and you cannot dare have any error in this. Therefore, if this is all you get, you know you cannot support Muhammad. You know you can't support early Islam. You know you can't support Mecca. You can't support all the stories about it. You cannot support the Hadith. You cannot support the Tafsir. You cannot support the Sirah. You cannot support the Tahqiq. All these genre of Islamic traditions, you dare not want to support. You only can support this book. This is all you've got is your authority. If that is the case, you elevate it to such a height, you put it up there so high that nobody dares attack it, no one can criticize it. With doing that, you have elevated it too high. It's way up in the stratosphere, and it's so easy just to use historical criticism. Just ask you one simple question, then deal with these manuscript variants, these orthographical variants, these consonantal variants, these razm variants. That's all we're asking. We're showing you that. That's why Dan Brubaker has done us a great favor. The fact that Dan Brubaker is the first one to come out with this, the fact that he did so just a year ago, not even a year now, and he's coming out with his second book in just a few weeks. You're going to see it. Much more damaging than his first book, proving to me that this is nothing more than a man-made book. Come on home, Muslims. We would never make that claim about the Bible. I thank God for my Bible, because this Bible, we do not say is sent down from God. It is inspired by God, written by men. And that's why I would expect to see men's thoughts, even their ideas. I do see that. I can see that with Paul's letters. He talks about what he's saying in Galatia. He doesn't say in Ephesus. He doesn't say the same thing in Philippi. He doesn't say the same thing in Corinth. That's why the Bible is so easy to follow. The stories are complete. One story follows another. There is no need for transitional phrases, because it all follows to a theme, and it all points to Jesus Christ. Everything in this book points to Jesus Christ. Ooh, I love it. It's such an easy book to read. It's for you to read. It's such an easy book to follow. It's hard to follow, actually. It's such a great model. The person of Jesus Christ in it is the model for you. I thank God for the Bible. I thank God we don't have these problems. I thank God we don't make these claims, and therefore we have not elevated the Bible to such a height that it can easily be brought down. We would dare not do that, because that's not what the Bible says for itself. We don't have a chapter 85:22 in the Bible. We don't have that. And that's why it's so good that we can, when you look at these two books, you can see which is the bigger, better book. This is the bigger, the better book. And that's why I love my Bible. Compared to it, I keep it bigger for that reason. So you can all see, not only symbolically, not only theologically, but also visually, which is the bigger, the better book. God bless you. It's been good to talk about it. We can probably unpack other things at a future date. But let's go ahead and as far as I'm concerned, this is just one more nail in the coffin of the Quran.
Thank you, Jay. A couple of people send in messages that they want to call. Feel free to call if you really, really, really want to. I'll just make a couple of comments. While you are seeing the physical evidence, and if you still choose to play the game of denial, That's absolutely fine. But remember, you are going to be accountable for that. And early Muslims did not have any problem for corruptions and additions and insertions and corrections, intentional corrections, being put together to the Quran. And it is only 21st century so-called lay Muslims, that means missionaries, more missionaries, and rest of Muslim world. Only a handful of academic kind of goes against them. Of course, after you seen the evidence, after you heard what Ibn Abbas said, and after you heard how the world of Islam went against Ibn Abbas, you would be asking simple questions. Where did Ibn Abbas got his authority? And where did rest of Muslim world got his authority? You will be asking the question, actually, what was Allah revealed at the first place? What did Muhammad recited at the first place? Or you will be asking the simple question, why within a couple of centuries of Islam, Muslims are start arguing with one another or even discussing with one another what Allah really said or what Allah really meant. Those are simple basic questions. Including these questions, where is the Quran which Muhammad received? Where is the sheep which eat the Quran, or where is the goat which eat the Quran? There are lots of questions will come up, but the point is those questions needs to be answered by so-called lay Muslims, including Muslim missionaries, because game of denial is not gonna work forever. So as we look forward to receive our answers, feel free to kind of make your comments on that. I'm sorry to hear that Jay is murdering Islam once again, but remember, when Islam gets
I don't
murdered,
murder anybody. For heaven's sakes, choose your words wisely. I'm a pacifist. We do never murder anything or anybody. We are destroying it, yes, but we don't murder it. We are asking the questions that were asked in the Bible. We're asking the exact same questions: redacted criticism, source, history criticism, what we call literary criticism. In this case, this is literary criticism. This has to do with orthographic criticism. Those were asked in the Bible back in the 1800s and the 1900s have all been resolved. Now we're turning our attention to the Quran. And we will do this with the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Vedas. We'll do this with the Book of Mormons. We'll do this with the Rig Veda, all of these different religious texts that are demanding to be held authoritative. We demand that they follow the same tests that the Christian Bible has already gone through. And that's why it's so good to know that since our Bible has gone through this test, has come up and roses, and that's why we can probably take it better than anybody else. We can understand it better than any other else because we have really created the vehicle for doing so. Historical criticism is really biblical criticism. Muslims keep reminding me of that. I said, exactly. We were the first ones to actually create the genre. And we are the first ones that actually to refer and actually respond to that genre in every category. Now, you are going to have to follow the same test. And what we're doing here today is something that should have been done right across the academic world. This is why it's fascinating. The academic world that cannot stand to, oh, goodness sakes, how can I keep talking with that huge mug in front of my face? That academic world, as you can see, has already moved beyond this. The academic world of Haydn Sidki has already accepted that there are manuscript variants, has already accepted that this is riddled with orthographical variations. They don't even have a problem with it because they don't understand what the Quran is claiming. They don't understand what the vast majority of Muslims who are watching are saying. And that's why Muslims who are watching, please don't keep making these claims. Why don't you be a little bit more honest? As we've been honest, why don't you understand that this is nothing more than a man-made book, full of errors, full of contradictions, full of historical anachronism, full of scientific claims that cannot be supported or substantiated. Come on home. Come on home to Jesus Christ. Come on home to the Bible. Come on home to this book. We can say this all the time because we already have passed this test. Your Quran cannot.
As we said Jay is murdering Islam, but as Islam gets being murdered, put in the grave, remember, King of Kings, Lord Jesus Christ is still alive, and with his blood on the cross, he offered himself to you. So come to Lord Jesus Christ. We'll see you on another live stream tomorrow. Until then, God bless you all.